Hello. Today I'm going to tie for you a vinyl extended body parachute dry fly. So this is more about the how-to than the end result. And I've seen everybody else work with these vinyl gloves recently, and they're wrapping them on some kind of mandrel, heating them up briefly with a lighter, some heat source. And it kind of glues them, melts them together, and they make a really cool hollow extended body. So I wanted to give that a shot, and as usual, um, I do it my own way. So here I have a needle in my vise. It's kind of the thickest one I had. To be honest, I wish it had a little more shape to it, maybe even a little curve. And as time goes on, I'll probably be able to improve all that. But here I am. I've wrapped the vinyl, held the end in place, and then just wrap back over itself. And this is one of my first my way departures. I'm using fine copper wire. There's a little piece left over for ribbing material, came from some lamp cord, and I use that to hold everything in place. I think the versions that I've seen, the folks still kind of slide their fingers back out of the way. Not that there's any risk of getting burnt here because you have to heat this stuff so briefly that I don't think it would even burn your finger. But there we're getting everything kind of positioned, locked on, trim the excess, and I'm coming in with this slider has kind of an extension on, so I can hold it under the camera. Now what you're seeing, I'm only putting the flame on the side, not underneath. If you get it underneath, there's too much heat. So I'm kind of waving it past each side. It's kind of a guessing game as to how much heat you need and whether or not your extended body is welded. But after a couple, and I made about 6 of these, that seems to be what it took to hold it together. So I came in with a big old brown marker and darkened it. And I think if I were trying to do a specific pattern, I might have done that in something a little more olive, maybe even done it in two-tone, a lighter bottom side of the abdomen. Now there I'm showing you, I took that same piece of wire and put it through just a standard sewing needle and made a loop so that I could put a couple of these mallard flank feathers in the loop. I'm going to put that needle through that extended body from the back end, pull that through, and now I put a little glue on it and pull it all the way in. So some lessons learned here as we got the hook in the vise when we start. I was also able to do this with thread and not necessarily use the wire. Thread worked just fine. I could snip it at both ends and leave what's in there in the body. Didn't hurt. And I ended up using 6 or 8 mallard fibers because it was easier to work with. And then at the end, and you'll see at the end of this, after I make this fly, I trim off the ones that you don't need and just leave 3 of those. So here I've got a good thread base. Another note here is that I went up behind the eye and I went ahead and built kind of like a little head there because I wanted to fill in the gap and the sharp edges that are sometimes present behind the eye of a hook. So I went all the way up there and wrapped, and that's because this is going to be a parachute fly, and I don't want to, and I'm not going to come back and finish around the eye of the hook. So I had to fill that in at the beginning and not at the end. So there I did a couple of wraps over, 1 or 2 around the hook. Going to trim off the excess at an angle and nice and short. And it kind of wants to move at this point, but I'm going to get a few more wraps on it and hit it with some super glue. And you'll probably see me nick my thread on that hook point there, and it leaves a little fiber, but I'll trim it off later. Like I said, I made 6 of these bodies before I made a video, and this is one that I put, I don't know, 5 or 6 of those fibers in. the mallard flank fibers for tails. I left them what I would say is too long. Didn't really, I don't know, it didn't look that way when I was first making this. But that's a size 20 TM TMC. I think it's a 206 BL. So it's kind of a large size 20. Now here I was just assessing whether or not I could put a wrap over that to fold it back tight, but it moves the post a little too far back on the fly. So I opted to unwind that one wrap and just come back and start to build the post right here. All right, so a couple of times around, pinch everything together. One time around the hook to save my work, and I'm going to put a little super glue on the thread and go over that post one more time. So work our way up. I don't know, not quite a hook gap above the hook, maybe a little high. Again, I can critique my work here. I'm not, my ego allows that. And at the end, I tied off underneath, and my parachute is pretty far above the body of the fly, and I'm not sure I like that, but it is what it is. So there, I started my hook, a couple of tight wraps, or I started my hackle, a couple of tight wraps around the hook, and then wrapped it up the post, trim off the excess. Okay, and there we took a little pause to go over and get a little more super glue. Cover up some thread wraps, especially up around just behind the eye of the hook, because again, I made a little bump there, wanted to close that little gap in the eye of this hook, and typically it would get a little head cement on it, so we'll do it now. Here's some olive super fine dubbing. Again, I'm not trying to make a pattern. I could have made a specific pattern out of this. This is more about the how-to. So I trimmed off that's really long staple dubbing. So I trimmed that off. It was going to be way too long if I got it all twisted around the thread. This is probably about a 2.5 inch dubbing noodle. And we'll go back and cover up those thread wraps where we tied down the body. I was going to jump ahead, but it left that angle on the side and it bothered me, so I did that in 2 hops. One more behind, then go in front. So here we'll just kind of fill things in, go once around the post, and that's where it's going to hang. And then we got to reposition the hook and the vise. So I like to do this. It's kind of more natural when it comes to wrapping the hackle. And we'll attach our hackle pliers. Kind of came across these ones with the handle on them again, and it's nice because they're out of the way when you're filming and you're not all thumbs and hands. I like to wrap into a little head cement. That's my Sally Hansen's. It's a little on the thick side. Works pretty well. So here we are. We'll just work our way down. And that's the part that I said kind of bothers me. If I was doing this a bunch of times in a row, I probably would have perfected how far up and how far down to go. There's going to be a little band of thread showing above the body. I don't think the fish will care. Again, this is more about the how-to. And we'll snip that rest of that hackle out of the way. And I'm going to do a whip finish, and that post is going to be too long and get in the way. So we'll trim some of that out. And that post is just a little bit of that gray macrame cord. Kind of a Charlie Craven find. He was the first one I heard mention it. And you get it at the craft store, and I have enough to give my grandkids and their grandkids. And it works great actually. It floats real high. I like the gray color. I bought 2 or 3 colors. And there we have it. And we'll snip that out of there. Now, I don't snip there. I kind of push those scissors through because I only want to cut the thread. I don't want to snip any of the hackle fibers out. So we'll reposition the fly back in its kind of more normal position. And reach in and snip things off. Stem was being a little finicky there. Didn't really trap much down on the other side, so let's call that good. And then I'm going to trim that post to its finished length. I like to cut it a little bit of an angle. And the post is about a body length or a hook length above the hackle. I don't know. That's what looked good to me. So we'll get a little more head cement and stick it in there underneath the hackle on that whip finish on those last couple wraps. So here's where we take and separate out that mallard flank. I don't know how durable that's going to be. The folks that I saw do this body so far, they've been using the I don't know what they're called, mayfly tails, the ones I have, but they're like nylon paint bristles. I don't know. They didn't look realistic enough to me. You're going to make an extended body, make a realistic fly. Using paint bristles didn't seem to be the way to go. I think there's a company out there that does one that's kind of modeled now. So there's the first couple fibers I'm going to snip out. And I didn't worry about getting them real close. I don't think that's going to matter. Then I'll come back here and fight with these a little bit and see. But you get to pick the ones that are kind of the same length that will cooperate and go where you want them to be. And I'd probably be okay with this except for one thing. I still have 2 fibers on that far side, so we're going to go back and try and separate those. I know this looks fiddly, but part of the problem is I'm staring back and forth between the camera, which is my phone, and looking at it for real. And I get a real magnified view, then none at all, and so in practice, without a phone in the way, it's a lot less fiddly. You can kind of jump right in and do this. So I have one more fiber to snip. I'm going to take out that one that's closest to me. I have 3 about the same length. Like I said before, they might be a little long. And I'm going to put a little drop of head cement on here. And you'll recall that when I pulled those through the body, I said it, but I didn't show you. I had a hard time trying to show you all that stuff on camera. So I figured if I talk about it, you'll figure it out and you'll do it the best way for you. But I put a little head cement on those fibers when I pulled them into the body, thinking they'll help hold it. They stuck all the way through, so they're tied down. They're not going to pull out. And then here, that little drop of head cement probably will dry, help separate the fibers, and seal that little hole. So there it is, the finished fly. A new trick, and if you hung in there to the end and want to learn more about me, look me up on Amazon. And until next time, be safe.